Hello and good evening. My name is Andres, and thank you for joining us tonight for the Art of Film's episode Breathless by the Frenchman Jean-Luc Godard. When we talk about Breathless, we're talking about the French New Wave. And while Breathless was not the first of the New Wave movement in France, it is considered probably the ultimate or the one that everyone goes to. French New Wave started actually in 1958. Breathless was in 1960. And while the New Wave era lasted less than a decade, French New Wave is considered one of the most important and impactful of the film eras. When we talk about French New Wave, we have to think about the Neorealism that the Italians did a decade earlier. So you have Fellini, which we talked about before in a previous episode. There was the Italian Neorealism, and that kind of spurred on this criticism that the French film critics like Godard and Truffaut and others started kind of culminating these ideas about film. And these were film critics. So Jean-Luc was a film critic. And they wanted to strip down film and use it as a way to tell story and a way to express one's art and opinion about life and about current politics and the situations. So when we look at French New Wave, we're really looking at films that are what they brought to the table as film critics and as they became film auteurs and creators themselves was the ability to kind of slow down the story. It wasn't as plot driven. It was now a little bit more character driven, I would say. And some of that's also due to like the neorealism, right, from the Italians. You see things that are more handheld, lower budget costs, more cinema verite, more of a documentary style. Godard did a lot of films with this very much kind of half documentary, half, fictional narrative that we would see in today's films. And the French New Wave movement is hugely impactful on even modern cinema today. You look at things like Tarantino, Scorsese, a lot of the directors that are popular now love Truffaut, Godard, things like that. So, and then when we look at that whole era of French New Wave, you gotta see Breathless. That's the one. It's not the first, but it's probably the most well-known or considered the best, right? I mean, there's also 400 Blows, which is brilliant too, which we will talk about that. But for now, let's talk about Breathless. So, French New Wave, lo-fi, breaking the rules, you know what I mean? Breaking the rules of cinema. Godard uses a lot of jump cuts. He's doing things that like you wouldn't necessarily be taught to do in film school. So he's breaking the rules. He's saying, look, as a critic and as a auteur, I'm going to break these rules and like tell my story this way and see how this works, right? And look at what's happening in the world, and that's my thesis on the world, and that the director is the owner of the film, and the director's stamp is on it, right? So this is kind of like that whole idea started here, right? Or at least was very central to their thesis or their mission statement or what you would say. So we look at Breathless. Let's go into that film and why that is important. You can see this. It's on the Criterion channel if you have that. You could get a couple other places streaming. Of course, you can purchase it. Breathless is a black and white film, 1958. It is jazzy. It is more plot, a little more plot. What's interesting is when you see these films, there is some of these existential conversations and these conversations about just life and kind of meanders a bit. And we see this in Tarantino films, in the diner scenes of Reservoir Dogs when they're just talking about Madonna and tipping and these things like that. And it's just these flow conversations that are very real. Again, that cinema verite, that kind of like documentary feel. And we love that. As modern audiences, we love that. And that's really coming from French New Wave. And maybe even down the line to, again, the Neorealism. So, Breathless follows a thief, con man, swindler, killer, Michel. We start off with Michel. He's a young, attractive man. He's a swindler. And right away, Godard breaks the fourth wall. So right away, he's looking at the camera and he's talking to us, the audience, about women or about, if you don't like the ocean and you don't like the mountains and you don't like good food, get out of here, His disdain for women, his language of being very dismissive of females, and not just women, but just people. And he's not necessarily a hero. He's not someone we really care for or root for in the beginning. He's a bit of a jerk. He's an ass. But we get introduced to him. There's some developments. He's scrounging for some money. He's looking for, there are these colleagues of his, other thieves, that he's trying to get some money from. And now the cops are after him because he killed a cop. He says on accident. It was kind of the heat of the passion. They were going to pull him over. He shot him dead. That was not a good idea. So he's now on the run. He goes into Paris, and we get introduced to the co-star, Patricia. Now, Patricia's American, speaks good French, but it's interesting because we don't get a lot of this like, oh, Americans are like this, French are like that. But there's little hints of it because while she speaks French in the film, many times she asks questions about, oh, what does that mean? What is this word? What is that word? I mean, multiple times. It's kind of fun. I like that because you see her like, they say a phrase or they say a word like spoon or it's just something simple. And then she said, oh, what is spoon? Or what is that? And so I just like that idea of her like in the process of learning the language and culture and things like that. But in no way does she feel really like a fish out of water. I mean, she feels like she kind of like belongs in this world. She is a writer, a journalist working for, I want to say the New York Herald or something like that, there in France, and has this relationship with Michel. In fact, she's pregnant, which he kind of blows off in kind of a typical fashion. It's kind of like, nonchalant kind of way. The film has actually a nice pacing, and while there are some moments of slow kind of existential conversation, it's very jazzy. The music is jazzy. There's this, there's a soundtrack of movement, especially the second half of the film. It's hopping because it's got this caper kind of story. They're on the run, and she's kind of complicit and helping in some elements. And there's this. It's an homage, actually. Godard said that this film was an homage to the kind of action-y, films of America, and how this was that kind of it's not noir, but it's that kind of capery, con man, heisty crime story that was popular in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and so he's using some of those tropes. So it's kind of interesting. So it's taking those American cool action-y ideas and putting them in this whole nother way, deconstructing it, right? Deconstructing those movies and putting them in this new format with lo-fi, not a lot of production, shots that are different, and the music, the soundtrack with the jazz and stuff. I found it really, really cool. And this is just, it's just really good. And the ending, and so there's a turn there where he, while is this kind of classic chauvinist pig type of guy, we kind of get the idea that maybe he's all kind of talk too, and that he does actually care for her. And so towards the end, he actually does care for her, and he makes some decisions based on the feelings he has for her, where Patricia turns him in and does that to show that she doesn't care for him. And so she's always kind of testing the waters a little bit with her feelings on him, and it's really kind of fascinating because it almost kind of reverses slightly there. But he would say these things, to her, like, "Oh, you make me puke. You're an idiot. Go away from me. You're horrible." But it's all an act, perhaps, because in a couple quiet moments to his friend, he says, "I love her. I actually do love her. And what am I going to do?" And he's trying to get to Rome. He's trying to get out of Dodge and go to Italy and be safe there. She doesn't necessarily want to do that, and she doesn't know what to do about this pregnancy. Does she keep the baby? Does she not? He does not have any interest in that, part of the equation. I found it a very good film. I think it is worthy of this discussion. It's definitely, to learn about French New Wave, you have to see this. It's part of it is the, I would say, quintessential French New Wave film, along with maybe, again, I mentioned 400 Blows, a couple others, but that one I think this is the one. And it's also palpable because, again, it's got those kind of American tropes and things like that. It's not just two people looking at the sky talking about life and death and things like that, which we could see a lot of that. What else do I want to say about it? I think that's it. I think it's definitely have to go see it. It's one of my favorite films now, honestly. It really is. I want to see it again. I would love to see it in the big screen. So go ahead and get a chance to see that. Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard, the French Swissman who made a great film. Interesting tidbit. Breathless was extremely popular. It was extremely popular. And Godard continued doing film criticism after it. So he was one of these guys, like some other members of that group, that were doing criticism as well as filmmaking. In fact, he said filmmaking is part of his criticism. That it's not doing one or the other, but actually doing the filmmaking is his form of criticism. And so after the popularity of Breathless, he really wished that the next movie he did would not be that popular. In fact, he felt that in a way that was a detriment to him creatively by having such a popular film because of the pressure of making this film that was so popular. And so he would have rather had a film a little bit more low-key, not as popular, and be able to kind of like do what he wanted to do and not feel somehow the pressure to beat that in some way. So that was interesting. There you go. That is my review here on The Art of Film. Thank you for watching. We will be discussing more films, that is for sure. We'll be doing some more Fellini stuff. I think I'm going to do some Terrence Malick. I might even do Barbarella, because that was pretty fun, by Roger Vadim. Or God Made Woman, or Here Comes Woman. What is it? God Made Woman? Something like that. That might be good too. Bridget Bardot. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later.